Alright, hello everyone, it's Happy, and today we're going to be looking at the top 5 strongest tier 10 tanks. Now, this is going to be the non-premium version, so this is only tech tree tanks, and don't forget, this is not simply my opinion, but this is rather me looking at the stats of all tier 10 tanks and seeing which ones have the better win rate and the better damage per battle. So I'm looking at official stats here, so don't blame me if your favorite tank isn't here. And with that, at number 5, we have the T-57 Heavy. Now, I'm very surprised that this tank more or less came out on the 5th spot, because to me, this is one of the strongest, if not one of the stronger tanks at tier 10. But then again, I feel like most players don't do well in tanks that are not super duper well armored, and I can understand that. I made a video on this tank recently, but to just go over the simple fact of the matter is that this tank has an amazing gun, not so amazing armor, and not so amazing mobility. So what is so special about this tank? And that is the 3-clip drum. So it has 3 shots in the drum, and it has a 19-second reload in general, and the interclip is 2.5 seconds, and with consumables you can make it even less, which allows you to do so much damage in a short period of time. That is the main thing about this tank, and of course the weapon handling, such as the aim time and dispersion, is superb on this tank. So overall, the gun is just a 10 out of 10, and this makes it it's the tank very enjoyable to play. That's the main reason behind it. I think we all know about the T-57 Heavy, so I don't need to talk too much about its weak armor and not so amazing mobility. At number 4, however, we have the Type 71. This is of course a Japanese tier 10 heavy tank, and this placement more or less makes sense. The tank's DPM is at 2,600 with a very long reload time. To be fair, the DPM is not that amazing for the alpha that this tank punches, which is 400. So I don't really think the DPM is one of this tank's stronger points. The gun itself, again, does not have the best weapon handling. The aim time is a little bit, wonky. And the dispersion is also not the best. It's good. It's not a bad dispersion rate. It's just like it could have been a little bit better for the amount this tank punches. So 400 alpha with 2,600 DPM and, average looking weapon handling doesn't make this tank great in regards to the gun. When you look at this tank's mobility, again, 37 kilometers forward and 15 backwards, again, doesn't look too amazing when you have something like the IS-7, which just runs past you as a very strong heavy tank. So what does this tank really have, you may ask? And that is basically the armor. The lower plate on this tank is so small that over mid to long ranges, it's going to be very hard to hit, especially as a mobile player. And everything else about the tank is just very strong in terms of armor. This tank has very good all-round armor on the sides, the turret, and the front. This tank probably has one of the best armor profiles for a heavy tank in the whole game, and that is why it is so strong and especially appealing to newer players. Because as I say, newer players like to rely more on armor compared to, very good players. And that makes complete sense, and that is why the Type 71 is such a desired and liked tank, at least in my opinion. At number 3, we're going to be putting the Minotauro. This is, of course, a tier 10 Italian tank destroyer, and this kind of surprised me because I do hear a lot about this tank and how people don't necessarily like this tank a lot. And when you actually look at the tank, it does kind of make sense. The tank has a very bad DPM, and it does have an interesting clip when you look at it. However, the most important thing about this tank is its armor, similar to that of the Type 71. This tank has one of the best frontal armors compared to any other tank. This tank barely has a weakness when you look at it from the front and when you don't load gold shells. Even with gold shells, a lot of medium tanks and light tanks will struggle to penetrate this tank frontally anywhere. The only place where you will be able to penetrate this tank is more or less the cupola on the top, and that is if you also hit it. Imagine trying to hit that cupola from a mid to long ranges. That is going to be impossible. That is one of the main attributes of this tank, and that is definitely the armor. Another thing is the alpha on this tank, which is 490, and you do get 2 shots of 490, so it's similar to that of the Foch, and the reload time for the first shell is going to be 9 seconds, and then you have the interclip reload, which is just over 3.5, and then you have another 9.96 reload time, which is not horrible. Like, it's completely playable, and it's actually not that bad. Overall, I think that this tank is quite special and unique because of its gun, which again doesn't have the best weapon handling, but it is quite unique to the Minotauro. And for me, I think that's something nice, and it gives a little bit of different variety in gameplay, especially after the next update. This tank is going to have an insane clip, because at least to what I hear, at least what I believe, is that this tank is going to be fully reloaded at the start of the game, which means that when you get to a position, you don't have to be standing there reloading. This tank is already going to be reloaded, and it's going to absolutely destroy tanks in the early game as well. So again, this tank has great armor and a decent gun, but not so amazing mobility. That's why I would place it at number 3. At number 2, we have the legendary 60 TP Lewandowskiego. This is a Polish tier 10 heavy tank, and this tank really doesn't need any explanation. This tank has decent enough speed for the armor it packs, which is pretty decent. The turret armor is great, the frontal armor is great, and so you have pretty decent all-around armor. And on top of that, the gun is quite good, because you have 600 alpha, and with tungsten shells you can make that 700. And, everything about this tank is just good. The weapon handling is alright, the mobility is alright, and the gun is also alright, and the armor is alright. And overall, it's a, jack of all trades. It's great. It has very good alpha for a heavy tank. So when you peekaboo other tanks, you're absolutely going to decimate them. And overall, it's just a good heavy tank to have around, It's one of those simple heavy tanks, but it's just so good because of its simplicity. That's what makes it special, and I feel like the 60 TP is one of those really, really solid tier 10 heavy tanks, which everyone needs to try. And at number 1, we're going to be placing the M6-Yo. This makes 100% sense to me, because the gun on the M6-Yo is superb. The weapon handling is great. The mobility on this tank is not amazing, but that's still doable, because the gun on this thing is great, and the armor is also pretty decent. Like, this tank has a combination of everything. You look at the T57 Heavy and you see an amazing gun. On the M6-Yo, you see an amazing gun, and on top of that, you have decent armor compared to that of the T57 Heavy, and that is why I feel like a lot of players do much better in the Yo compared to the T57 Heavy. That's simply because this tank lives a lot longer, and of course it's a little bit more comfortable with something like 10 degrees of gun depression, which make the M6-Yo very, very good in all types of scenarios compared to the T57 Heavy. So tell me what you guys think about this list in the comment section below, and with that, happy is out, and I'll definitely see you guys next time. Bye bye.